Hello out there. It's always my pleasure to welcome you to Cross-Cultural Experiences, where I invite a guest who must have left his or her cultural area of cultural origin, goes to another place, finds something exciting, shocking, whatever, and then wishes to share that experience. But more importantly, what did you learn from that? Because this is our world. People are different, people do things differently, and it is not your place to leave your area and go and dictate to them how they need to conduct themselves. So this today, I have a special guest, Marquita. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Good morning.
Yeah, good day. So let me have you introduce yourself the way you like, and then we just move on to sharing your experience.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Hello, I'm Marquita Smith, and I currently am an Associate Dean for Grad Programs and Research at the University of Mississippi, but I am formerly a resident of both Liberia and Ghana. And so having uh, a U.S. orientation and then being able to go and work internationally was very exciting for me, but I didn't learn much until I moved to live. And so there's a difference in being a worker in a different context, or even being a tourist in a different context, than setting up roots and living from day to day with people.
So that must have been very exciting because the normal thing is for people to move from Liberia to the US. This time it is US to yeah, so I'm looking forward to getting you. Even Ghana, you were in Ghana also.
Yes.
Uh, okay, let's hear the experience. Start with Liberia, start with Ghana. It's your choice.
Okay, I'm gonna share a story from each culture, but
Right.
I went to Liberia originally to cover the first election run for Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, and when she was a candidate.
Yeah.
And so I was on the ground for like 6 months, and I decided that I would write a grant because I noticed that everyone from the diaspora and the international press that kind of swooped in to cover the election, but there were few Liberians that were telling the stories of, of what's happening in their home. And so I wrote a grant, and it took me back maybe about 2 years later to help establish, a strong press corps and to really just be a support. And so I went back as an organization of one,
Yeah.
and I had to set up a bank account and do all of the things. So I chose the Nigerian Echo Bank as
Okay.
my bank in Liberia. And I chose it because at the time it was the only bank in the country that had an ATM, which was my Western socialization. With I needed a
Yeah.
bank that had an ATM. And so I remember going to the Echo Bank, which was just across the street from my compound where I lived. And I got there, and there was no money in the ATM. So I went inside, and with my American self, I go inside and I'm like, the ATM has no money, so I need to do a withdrawal at the counter. And
Right.
the attendant at the counter said, there's no money at the bank. Like
Even the bank itself.
the bank was out of money, allegedly.
All right. Okay.
So at this point, I couldn't bring my mind to understand how I was at a bank with no money. And so I'm growling and I'm screaming, like, where's my money? Because I have a substantial amount of cash in this bank.
Yeah.
But today the bank is out of money. And so a manager came down to look and see what all the ruckus was. And they looked at around and they said, oh, the mulatto is very upset. And so I was looking for the upset mulatto. I was like, where?
What?
The mulatto is upset. I'm very upset too. Maybe we can be together in our in our outrage. And I discovered that I was the mulatto, and that was really hilarious to me. Although I would never have considered myself such, particularly on U.S. soil, where both my parents are people of color, and
Correct. Because they refer to, people of, white skin as mulattoes, and you are even
absolutely
darker than some of them.
right. And so I did not. I was looking around for the mulatto, the angry
Where is the
mulatto,
mulatto?
And the angry mulatto was me. And so at the time, I was very upset and somewhat offended, but over my stay, I began to embrace it and find it to be a term of endearment within the culture. Um, and just to understand that the banks, this was post-conflict, and the banks run out of money. They get the money back that I needed to keep cash, which I wasn't accustomed to doing, and that yes, you can go to the bank and it can be out of money, and this is a typical occurrence. And as my colleagues would say to me, this too is Liberia. I learned to understand that in ways in which others may not, right? But the bank was out of money. So
In other words, you learned how to adjust to the situation of banks not having money.
yes, I learned to be prepared and more
Yes.
flexible and to understand that outside of my debit card, credit card experiences that I socialized
Yeah.
to rely on, that there are cultures where cash is king and you should always have emergency cash anyway. And so
And
when I came back to the US, I keep a little bit of cash around the house
oh, okay, that helped.
as a result, just in case that they may not be out of money, but the electrical grid or some systems may be down, and I'll at least have some cash. So it
And
was
then you also learned that each time you had the word mulatto, then they were referring to you.
yeah that I in some cultures would might
Yeah.
be considered to be a mulatto, but
Okay.
not at home, but other places,
Other
and it's
places,
okay.
yeah. Yeah, it's okay. But they didn't mean, I don't think they meant anything. It's just to say that you are visiting them and then you're not from there and therefore you're a mulatto by
Right.
definition.
And like I said, I learned to embrace it as a term of endearment,
Okay.
whereas here I would not, right? So in that culture, they didn't mean it in a derogatory manner. It was
Yeah,
just a
actually,
label.
that's the whole thing. One of the things about this forum to adapt and then understand that just it didn't mean anything really. It's just endearment, as you called it. Okay,
Absolutely.
all right. Let's take a trip to Ghana.
Let's go to Ghana, where I was a Fulbright scholar at the University of Ghana, and I had the opportunity to teach graduate students there
At Legon.
at Legon. And
Okay.
so it was a wonderful experience for me. When I lived in Liberia, we had limited power and things. So Ghana was my respite. So I would go there once a month
Yeah.
to go to the mall and to have a little bit of urban experience. And so Ghana, I became very acquainted with Ghana, and
Yeah.
there's a group of Black Americans that live there, and they're part of the AAAG, African Americans living in Ghana. And many of them had either worked there with some of the oil companies or married and moved there and had been there for like 30 something years.
Oh,
So
yeah.
yeah, so even while I was living in Liberia, I got to know the social structure of AAAG. And so when I moved there, they were my cash people and my advisors, and they could
Yeah.
help me, understand the economic circumstances and what I needed to do to get my paperwork together and those kind of things. So it was good to go there to somebody, right? To people I had a previous relationship with. So that was,
Great. Okay.
yeah.
So Ghana offered you a totally different experience.
Yes, when I went to Liberia, I just went with
Yeah.
no base and just was finding my way. But when I went to Ghana, I had at least a group who had lived
Ah,
cross-culturally. And
was there any specific experience you recall about Ghana?
absolutely.
Yeah.
So I was invited to a funeral in the North region, and
Oh,
I thought it was my first funeral. So I did
funerals in Ghana, they are something else.
right. And so my colleague says, Marquita, we have to get your funeral clothes. And I was like, oh, I have a black dress. I can wear that one. And she says, oh, no. So she came with the materials so that I could be matching within the family.
It
And I
was
was
that
like,
kente.
yeah, I was like, oh, this is elegant. It's really nice. But everybody knew it to be funeral clothes, except for me. I thought I will surely wear this again somewhere else because it's very nice. And so that was the beginning of the catastrophe of it all. But when we went to the funeral, I assumed that I would be there for, a weekend or so. But
Yeah.
I did not know the funeral was going to be like 10 days.
Okay.
So I went, we went, it was a nice drive. It was pretty far. And
Yeah.
I was carried just a few items because I thought I would be going for the weekend.
Yeah.
But the funeral was like 10 days. And I think we were there for like 7 of the funeral days. And so I could not, I was so, I should have asked perhaps, like, how
Yeah.
long can the funeral be? So even my Western sensibilities in
Yeah.
terms of even Black American culture, where there's a repast and, a waking
Yeah.
opportunity, which might be, 3 days or two,
Yeah.
I was not prepared for the funeral festivities
For
and
10 days.
for the 10 days and the level of celebration and the number of baby goats and all of the things. And
Feasting and merriment.
yes, I did not know, I thought I was prepared and that it was nonstop. It was one of the most celebratory things I've ever. In fact, I was in the posture of quiet and silence because I thought it's a funeral. The people would be bereaved. I would go and I would pay my respects and I would be very quiet.
No. You remind me, there was a time I was in Ghana and I saw a billboard and they advertised a funeral on a billboard. And they said, you don't have to know the person to be around, just come. I said,
That
okay.
so you went? Did
Yeah,
you just go?
just go, just come.
Absolutely. Yeah, it was a thing. And so I became Auntie Marquita to
Yeah.
all of the people at the village, and it was a thing.
Oh.
I was pounding fufu and trying to be helpful in the ways but I had no idea when I accepted the invitation to go to the funeral that it would be people from all over. In fact, it was a small traffic situation for people trying
Oh, okay.
to attend the services, but it was very nice. It was
And of course, you learned that funerals are not the same across cultures.
absolutely the
Right. Yeah.
expectations,
Yeah.
the celebratory homegoing, um, openness. Like in my own culture, people might be offended if people who don't know the people show up,
Yeah.
but the expectation that you will show up
Right.
is very different. And yes, I saw several of the billboards, particularly if you're in the Ashanti region, and
Yeah. I
it's
saw the same thing and it was like, come one, come all. Everybody, you're welcome.
absolutely, absolutely. And after that celebration, I was I was blown away. So I had a different respect when people said bereavement time. You say I need a bereavement day or so or two.
Yeah.
In that case, you could be a bereavement month. You have to go and take the time. You might have to travel, and it's not a 1 day kind of situation or two. There's all kinds of celebrations, and people have to save up from them. And then people come from the diaspora, and that was the other thing. It's like
Oh,
people. It's a thing. It's a real production, a family reunion. It could be a time for some political adjustments. It is the center of so many
so many
things.
activities. Huh?
I saw so much willing and dealing happening at the funeral, right? It's like people know you're going to be there, so they show up and all kinds of things. Some land was being bought and sold. Oh, it was one of the most interesting places to be an observer at. And a
All right.
participant. So I wasn't just an outside observer. I became a participant pretty quickly. And so it was fun, but unexpected. I was stressed out at once, but again, you adapt
Yes.
and you enjoy the journey, right? You're in it, and so I was like, I'm here, however
You know,
long. People were like, "Hey, we got some clothes. clothes came from wherever I needed them. The ones I had, I was able to wash.
Don't worry about clothes. We have plenty.
The community took care of me.
All right, it's that's a very good place to end our conversation. But I can't. I mean, it's always very exciting to have people's how people's experiences in other places. You go to a bank, there's no money in the bank. You go to a funeral, instead of wearing long faces, then there is jubilation. Oh, I only came with one pair of clothes. Don't worry, we'll give you more.
They took care of me, and to the point where somebody was sewing them as I was sitting there.
Oh,
I just
yeah.
have never experienced that kind of hospitality.
Okay.
And
At
they
a funeral.
at the funeral, and they didn't mind me. They didn't mind that I was unprepared, or that I
Yeah.
didn't know customs. They
But
just
nobody called you a mulatto there.
they did not call me a mulatto there. The word there is a bruni. And of course, some small children who didn't know
Yes.
there says, this
That's
is a
a
bruni.
white person, Obroni.
Yes, this is a foreigner. This is where's the bruni? So I said, oh. So in each culture,
There
there's
was
whatever.
something. Okay.
Yes.
All right. I
But
want to thank you for your time, to share your experiences. And I know that if anybody goes to Liberia and you're called a mulatto, no problem. They don't mean any harm. You're
no
invited
problem.
to a funeral in Ghana. That's okay. You go and feast. You don't know. You don't
Yes.
need to know
Go
who.
enjoy the
Enjoy
journey.
yourself.
It's okay. You don't have to be somber or sad. Go
All right.
celebrate.
Okay. Thanks again for the time.